Lieutenant Maya Chen wiped sweat from her brow as she crawled through the narrow maintenance shaft of the GCS Intrepid. The ship shuddered violently as another volley of Xenovori energy weapons found their mark. She cursed under her breath when her elbow struck a jutting pipe. "Status report, Lieutenant," Captain Reeves barked through her comm. 3 minutes until auxiliary power, sir," Maya replied, reconnecting severed connections with practiced efficiency. "If we still had a proper engineering team, I wouldn't be doing this alone." She didn't mention that half the engineering crew had been vaporized when Deck 7 took a direct hit. 4 months ago, she'd been designing revolutionary clean energy systems on Mars. Then the draft came, pulling every qualified engineer into military service as the Xenovori advance reached the outer colonies. The ship lurched again, throwing Maya against the wall. Warning lights bathed the cramped space in crimson. Something was wrong. The damage was worse than initial scans suggested. "We're losing containment in the reactor core," she reported, her fingers flying across her diagnostic pad. "Standard protocols won't work. The regulatory systems are completely fried." "Fix it, Lieutenant," came the terse reply, "or we're all dead." Maya stared at the failing systems, mind racing. The conventional solution required parts they didn't have and time they couldn't spare. But maybe. Her hands moved before her conscious mind fully formed the plan, accessing subsystems in configurations that shouldn't work together. She bypassed safety protocols, rerouting power through secondary and tertiary backups simultaneously. A dangerous approach that violated every regulation in the handbook. "What are you doing, Chen?" the chief engineer demanded over the comm. "That configuration will overload." His voice cut off as a massive impact rocked a ship. Maya's diagnostic pad showed catastrophic damage to the bridge. All command-level life signs flatlined instantly. She was on her own. Maya crawled faster, reaching the main engineering hub as emergency lighting flickered throughout the vessel. The remaining engineering staff were either unconscious or frantically trying to contain fires erupting from overloaded consoles. She slid into the main control station, fingers dancing across the interface. Strange calm settled over her despite the chaos. The ship's systems responded to her touch with unexpected fluidity, as though the complicated machinery recognized her somehow. Maya's consciousness seemed to expand, awareness spreading throughout the Intrepid's systems. She could sense damaged sections, reroute power, and strengthen shields in ways that should be impossible given their damaged state. It felt natural, like the ship was an extension of her own body. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, watching shield efficiency increase beyond design specifications. The diagrams on her screen showed impossible configurations that nonetheless functioned perfectly. A sudden shift in the battle drew her attention to external cameras. The Xenovori vessels had broken formation, multiple ships converging toward the Intrepid with single-minded purpose. They were ignoring easier targets to focus specifically on her ship. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered the navigational A, surprised by the authority in her own voice. The ship responded instantly, engines firing in perfect sequence despite the damage they'd sustained. As the Intrepid slipped past the Xenovori formation and jumped to faster-than-light speed, Maya didn't notice the specialized drone hovering just outside visual range, transmitting directly to the Xenovori command vessel. Aboard that vessel, the Empress herself studied the human engineer with growing interest. Her compound eyes narrowed as she reviewed the sensor readings that showed impossible neural patterns emanating from the fleeing ship. After millennia of searching, she whispered to her silent attendants, "We have found the one. Divert all resources to tracking that vessel." Maya jerked awake in her quarters, heart hammering against her ribs. The strange dream clung to her consciousness. Vast structures of impossible geometry floating in space, mathematical equations that shifted and evolved as she observed them. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to clear the lingering images. Lieutenant Chen, report to engineering, the ship's AI announced, its voice oddly melodic compared to its usual monotone. 3 days had passed since their narrow escape from the Xenovori attack. 3 days of uneasy glances from the surviving crew. They hadn't decided if she was a hero or if her unorthodox methods had invited disaster. Maya swung her legs over the edge of her bunk and noticed her terminal screen glowing with complex schematics she didn't remember accessing. The screen cleared itself the moment she focused on it. "Strange," she muttered, pulling on her uniform. The sleeve caught on her wrist, revealing the fine tracery of scars from electrical burns sustained during the attack. Wounds that should have taken weeks to heal were already fading to silver. In engineering, Acting Captain Mercer waited with a grim expression. "We're limping to the mining colony on Deimos IV. Our long-range communications are shot, and we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet." "How long until we reach the colony?" Maya asked, already assessing the damage reports, scrolling across nearby screens. 18 hours, if the engines hold," Mercer replied. "I need you to keep them functioning until they arrive." As Maya worked through her shift, she noticed the ship's systems anticipating her needs. Diagnostic tools appeared on screens before she requested them. Para rerouted to her location as she moved through the vessel. When she attempted to document these anomalies, the logs mysteriously deleted themselves. That night, the dreams intensified. Symbols floated through her subconscious, not quite letters or numbers, but something between mathematics and music. She understood them perfectly within the dream, but upon waking, they slipped from her grasp like water. The Intrepid docked at Deimos IV the following day, the small mining colony their only hope for critical repairs. Maya supervised the offloading of damaged components when a silent alarm pulsed against her consciousness. She froze, somehow knowing the exact nature of the threat before the official alert sounded. Xenovori infiltrators detected in Cargo Bay 3, the ship's AI announced, as security teams scrambled to respond. Maya found herself running toward the danger rather than away from it. 2 engineering technicians lay injured outside the sealed cargo bay doors. Inside, she could sense the infiltrators moving with lethal purpose toward the ship's central processing core. Without conscious thought, she pressed her palm against the access panel. Electricity seemed to flow from the ship into her body and back again in a perfect circuit. Every defense system aboard the Intrepid activated simultaneously, not just security protocols, but environmental controls, maintenance routines, even food preparation units. They worked in harmonious coordination, herding the infiltrators into containment fields that shouldn't have been possible given the ship's damaged state. "How did you do that?" whispered one of the injured technicians, staring at Maya with a mixture of fear and awe. Before she could respond, a weathered hand gripped her arm. Maya turned to find an elderly colonist, his eyes wide with recognition. "You must come with me now," he said urgently, "before they send more hunters." He led her through the colony's winding corridors to an ancient lift hidden behind maintenance panels. They descended in silence until reaching a vast chamber carved directly into the planetoid's bedrock. The walls were covered in primitive drawings illuminated by bioluminescent fungi. Maya gasped as she recognized the symbols from her dreams etched into the stone. The illustrations showed human-like figures surrounded by concentric circles of light, commanding massive machines and cosmic forces. The Starwalkers called them world shapers, the elder explained, his voice reverent. They came across galaxies to study them, the humans who could speak to machines as if they were flesh of their flesh. His knurled finger traced a central figure on the wall, a human woman with radiating lines emerging from her head, standing before kneeling alien forms. "The queens of metal and mind," he whispered. "We've waited generations for the bloodline to resurface." Maya struggled against the restraints binding her to the examination table. The metal cuffs didn't yield, but she could sense the electronic locks, almost taste their circuitry on her tongue. A mere thought could trigger the release mechanism, yet she resisted the temptation. Better to hide the full extent of her abilities from these people. "Cognitive response is off the charts again," remarked Dr. Morton, a slender woman with calculating eyes who hadn't left Maya's side since Coalition Special Forces extracted her from Deimos IV 3 weeks ago. "Neural activity in the temporal lobe exceeds human baseline by 340%. The Prometheus facility hummed around them, a classified research installation buried deep within an asteroid field. Maya had been transferred here against her will after reports of the Deimos incident reached high command. Her protests that she was a soldier, an engineer with a duty to return to her post, fell on deaf ears. Now she was Subject 37, a laboratory specimen rather than Lieutenant Chen. The microfilaments throughout her cerebral cortex appear to be growing, noted a male technician, adjusting a scanner hovering inches from Maya's head. They're forming new connections daily. Maya closed her eyes, shutting out the clinical discussions about her brain as though she weren't present. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she could visualize the facility's systems, power conduits running through walls, security protocols cycling through routines, communications arrays transmitting encrypted data packets. The ability had strengthened since Deimos, becoming clearer and more precise with each passing day. "We're increasing stimulus intensity," Dr. Morton announced, inputting commands into a nearby console. Subject demonstrated heightened response to electromagnetic pulses yesterday. Pain lanced through Maya's skull as the machine above her bed activated. She bit back a scream, refusing to give them the satisfaction. The agony intensified as they pushed the equipment beyond safety parameters. "Heart rate elevated but stable," the technician reported. "Brain activity spiking in regions previously dormant in human subjects." Through the haze of pain, Maya felt something new, a distant signal pulsing like a beacon at the edge of her perception. Without conscious intent, her mind reached for it, desperate for escape from the torture of the test. Connection established. Maya gasped as her awareness suddenly expanded beyond the facility, beyond the asteroid field, linking to ancient systems scattered across multiple star systems. For a heartbeat, she existed in multiple places simultaneously, her physical body strapped to the examination table while her consciousness touched dormant networks from a civilization long extinct. In that moment of connection, she glimpsed something unexpected, that Cenevori collective consciousness. Not the mindless hive intelligence described in coalition briefings, but trillions of individual minds linked in perpetual agony. Their expansion across the galaxy wasn't driven by conquest, but by desperate search, looking for something to end their suffering. Looking for her. The connection severed as the pain became too intense, equipment overloading around her. Alarms blared as systems throughout the facility malfunctioned simultaneously. What happened? Demanded a military officer who had been observing from behind one-way glass. Did she do that? Dr. Morton stared at Maya with renewed fascination. She established a quantum link with something outside this facility, something ancient. The Coalition wants weapons to use against the Xenovori, the officer stated coldly. If she can disable systems remotely, that's exactly what we need. It's more complex than that, Dr. Morton countered, reviewing readings from the experiment. She wasn't attacking systems, she was communicating with them. As technicians rushed to stabilize equipment, Maya stared at the ceiling, processing what she had witnessed. The Xenovori weren't the monsters Coalition propaganda portrayed. They were suffering beings driven by an imperative they couldn't understand or resist. And somehow, impossibly, she held the key to ending their pain. Prepare for deep neural mapping, Dr. Morton instructed her team. We need to understand exactly what makes her different from previous subjects. Maya closed her eyes again, feeling the facility's security protocols surrounding her like prison bars. But now she could see the gaps between them, weaknesses she might exploit when the moment was right. She just needed to survive long enough to understand what she was becoming. Sirens wailed throughout the Prometheus facility as emergency lighting bathed corridors in pulsing red. Maya ran alongside Dr. Morton, who clutched a portable data core against her chest like a precious child. How did they find us? The scientist gasped as they rounded a corner, narrowly avoiding a section of collapsed ceiling. Maya didn't answer. She could sense that Xenovori hunters moving through the station with terrible precision, their movements coordinated by a singular consciousness. Unlike the mindless drones described in military briefings, these were elite warriors with individualized tactics and a shared purpose. Find the human with the special neural pattern. Find her. This way, Maya urged, pulling the scientist down a maintenance shaft. Her enhanced perception of the facility's systems showed her escape routes invisible to normal human senses. They reached the emergency shuttle bay just as the facility's reactor initiated containment failure procedures. Dr. Morton fumbled with the launch controls, while Maya sealed the airlock behind them. "We have less than 2 minutes," Maya warned, taking over the pilot's seat. Her fingers danced across the controls with intuitive precision. The shuttle broke free as explosions rippled through the research station. A Xenovori strike craft immediately changed course to intercept them, but Maya executed a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible in the ungainly escape vessel. "Where are you going?" Dr. Morton asked, noticing they weren't heading toward the nearest Coalition outpost. Following a signal, Maya replied, unable to explain the persistent pull she felt toward a particular sector of space, like a beacon calling her home. The shuttle took heavy damage during their escape. Warning lights flashed across the console as the propulsion system failed, sending them into an uncontrolled descent toward an uncharted world. Maya managed to soften their crash landing, but the impact still knocked them both unconscious. She awoke to golden sunlight filtering through the cracked viewport. Outside, a dense jungle spread in all directions, except one. Maya stared in disbelief at the massive structure rising above the tree line, less than a kilometre away. Its distinctive angular spires and impossible geometry matched exactly the buildings from her dreams. "We need to go there," she said, helping a dazed Dr. Morton from the wreckage. They travelled through the jungle for hours, Morton struggling to keep pace while still clutching her precious data core. As they approached the ancient structure, Maya felt energy humming through her body, resonating with something inside the building. "This architecture predates any known civilization," Dr. Morton murmured, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her exhaustion. Materials analysis suggests it's at least 50,000 years old. The entrance, a towering archway inscribed with familiar symbols, seemed to shift slightly as Maya approached, as though adjusting to her presence. Inside, dust-covered corridors illuminated automatically as they passed, dormant systems awakening after millennia of silence. They reached a central chamber where a circular platform dominated the space. Maya stepped onto it without hesitation, drawn by instinct she couldn't explain. Light erupted around her, coalescing into a holographic figure, tall and elegant, with features both alien and oddly familiar. Protocol recognition confirmed. The figure announced, its voice resonating with harmonic overtones. Sovereign genetic sequence intact after 49,837 years. Dr. Morton stared in wonder. What is it saying? It's saying it recognizes me. Maya whispered, but I don't understand why. The holographic guardian studied Maya with ancient eyes. You carry the sovereign protocol, the government system created by the architects to maintain balance across galaxies. Images formed in the air around them. A vast civilization spanning countless worlds, creating technologies that manipulated the fabric of reality itself. Their crowning achievement, specialized neural pathways allowing compatible beings to interface with their network and create harmony among diverse species. As extinction approached, the last architect queen transferred the protocol into early humans, the Guardian continued. Their unusual neural plasticity made them ideal carriers for our legacy. You, Maya Chen, possess the most complete expression of this protocol since the fall. The Guardian's gaze intensified. By the laws established before stars had names, you are the rightful sovereign of all architect-derived civilizations, including the Xenovori Collective, whose corrupted connection to the protocol drives their endless suffering. Maya fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the revelation. She wasn't just an engineer with unusual abilities. She was the inheritor of an ancient legacy meant to govern civilizations across the stars. I'm an engineer, not a queen. Maya paced the ancient chamber, her voice echoing against walls that had stood silent for millennia. This has to be some kind of mistake. Dr. Morton was still examining the holographic displays, showing the history of the architects, her scientific curiosity temporarily overshadowing the danger of their situation. The genetic markers in your DNA match perfectly with these records. According to this data, your brain structure was literally designed to interface with their technology. Maya ran her fingers through her short hair in frustration. 3 months ago, I was designing power systems for Martian colonies. I had an apartment, a cat, and student loans. This can't be happening. Before the Guardian could respond, proximity alerts pulsed through Maya's consciousness. She sensed coalition ships entering orbit. Somehow, they had tracked the shuttle's trajectory. Within hours, the ancient structure was surrounded by coalition special forces. Admiral Harrison himself led the team that found Maya and Dr. Morton in the central chamber. Lieutenant Chen, he acknowledged curtly before turning to Dr. Morton. Doctor, what have you discovered? Maya noticed how Harrison's attention focused entirely on the technology, barely acknowledging the holographic guardian that continued to observe them silently. She made a split-second decision. It's an advanced weapons system, she reported, stepping forward. The facility contains defensive capabilities that could be adapted to coalition use against the Xenovori. The lie came easily, born from instinct to protect the truth. Something told her that revealing her supposed sovereign status would only make her more of a research subject, or worse, a political pawn. Dr. Morton shot her a questioning look, but remained silent. Admiral Harrison surveyed the chamber with renewed interest. How quickly can it be weaponized? The systems are complex, Maya replied. We'll need a research team to understand the interface fully. Within days, The ancient facility was transformed into a coalition research base. Scientists and military personnel swarmed the structure, cataloging technology they barely understood. Maya was appointed to lead the technical integration team, no longer a prisoner, but still watched closely. Late one night, as she worked alone in the central chamber, a young xenobiologist approached her workstation. "Lieutenant Chen." "I'm Dr. Elias Vorn," he introduced himself, glancing nervously at the surveillance cameras before placing a datapad beside her. "I've been studying xenovori physiology. There's something you need to see." Maya accessed the files, finding detailed scans of captured xenovori. Their neural structures contained filaments remarkably similar to her own, but distorted and inflamed. "They're all in constant pain," Dr. Vorn explained quietly. "Particularly the Empress. Her brain shows signs of a corrupted interface, almost like a badly implemented version of your neural enhancements." The implications struck Maya with terrible clarity. That Xenovori Empress carries a damaged version of this sovereign protocol. Vorn nodded. "The corruption is driving their entire species mad. When exposed to certain frequencies your brain naturally generates, captured specimens show temporary relief from their suffering." Maya recalled the connection she'd briefly established from the Prometheus facility, the glimpse of collective agony that drove the Xenovori Empire. Against direct orders, she began working on a modified signal using the ancient system's capabilities. If the Xenovori suffered from a corrupted version of her neural pattern, perhaps she could transmit a corrective template. "This is highly unauthorized," Vorn warned, though he continued helping her configure the equipment. "So it was drafting civilians into military service," Maya replied grimly. When the system was ready, she initiated the transmission, channeling it through the ancient network that still spanned the galaxy. The unexpected feedback knocked her unconscious immediately. Maya found her consciousness floating in a vast, crystalline structure, a mental landscape unlike anything she'd experienced. Before her stood a towering, iridescent being with compound eyes that reflected her image thousands of times over. That Xenovori Empress. At last, the alien consciousness whispered directly into her mind. After centuries of searching, the true sovereign reveals herself. Their minds touched across vast distances, and Maya experienced firsthand the collective agony of trillions of connected beings. She understood now. The Xenovori weren't inherently violent. They were being driven by excruciating pain that only subsided when they sought her unique neural pattern. When Maya regained consciousness, alarms were already blaring throughout the facility. Dr. Vorn helped her to her feet, his face pale with fear. "The entire Xenovori Armada has changed course," he reported. "Every ship in their fleet is heading directly for this planet." Chaos erupted throughout the coalition base as sensors detected the approaching Xenovori Armada. Officers shouted contradictory orders, while technicians scrambled to activate defensive systems. Maya stood in the center of the storm, her mind still reeling from the connection with the Empress. Admiral Harrison stormed into the central chamber, his face flushed with anger. "What did you do, Lieutenant?" "Our long-range sensors show the largest gathering of Xenovori forces ever recorded, heading straight for us." "I was testing communication frequencies," Maya replied, deciding a partial truth was safer than a complete lie. "There may have been unexpected results." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Your priority is converting this facility into a weapon. Nothing else." "With respect, sir, weapons won't solve this," Maya countered. "I've discovered something about the Xenovori." "I don't need theories, Lieutenant. I need firepower," Harrison cut her off. This facility is now under direct military control. Begin weapons conversion immediately. Maya watched him leave, understanding that Harrison saw only one path forward, the same path that had led humanity into this losing war in the first place. As an engineer, she knew that when a solution repeatedly failed, the fundamental approach needed reconsideration. "What will you do?" Dr. Vorn asked quietly, joining her at the central console. Maya stared at the ancient controls, seeing not instruments of war, but interfaces to a network designed for harmony. "I need more information about the Xenovori biology and how it interfaces with the protocol." While Harrison's team established perimeter defenses, Maya and Vorn worked tirelessly. The xenobiologist smuggled additional research data to her, helping her understand the true nature of the Sovereign Protocol. It was never intended to create rulers, but symbiotic facilitators, beings who could harmonize diverse intelligences across species barriers. The original design was brilliant, Maya murmured, studying the architect's schematics. The protocol wasn't a crown, but a conduit, a biological interface allowing different species to communicate and cooperate without losing their uniqueness. "Then what went wrong with the Xenovori?" Vorn asked. Maya's fingers traced the neural pathways displayed on the screen. Corruption in the transmission. Like a program with damaged code that still runs but produces harmful results. Reports came in that the coalition fleet had arrived in orbit, preparing to intercept the Xenovori armada. Maya knew they were hopelessly outmatched. This confrontation would only end in more destruction unless she found another way. Making her decision, she sealed the doors to the central chamber, locking herself inside against direct orders. Alarms immediately blared as security forces attempted to override her lockout. "Lieutenant Chen, stand down immediately," Harrison's voice boomed through the communication system. Maya ignored him, her hands moving with increasing confidence across the ancient interface. Her engineering mindset provided the breakthrough she needed, seeing the protocol not as immutable law, but as a blueprint that could be modified and improved. "All systems require maintenance and updates," she muttered to herself, "even those created by advanced civilizations." Above the planet, the space battle erupted as the first wave of Xenovori ships engaged the coalition fleet. Maya felt the weapons fire like distant thunder through her enhanced perception. Time was running out. She reached deeper into the architect system, no longer just interfacing but actively redesigning. Her consciousness expanded throughout the ancient network as she reconfigured the fundamental parameters of the protocol itself. Where the original design created a hierarchical structure with the sovereign at its apex, Maya reimagined it as a distributed network where power and authority flowed multidirectionally. As security forces began cutting through the sealed doors, Maya completed her reconfiguration and initiated the transmission. The energy requirement was enormous, draining power from the entire facility as the signal pulsed outward through the ancient network. The signal penetrated the Xenovori hive mind, causing every ship in their fleet to suddenly power down. Minutes of tense silence passed as both coalition and Xenovori forces hung motionless in space. Maya collapsed from the effort, her consciousness dimming as the altered protocol propagated through the network. Before darkness claimed her, a single communication came through, directed personally to her. "We see what you have done," the Empress's voice whispered directly into her mind. "For the first time in countless generations, the pain has ceased. We request parley with the one who brings silence to our suffering." Maya stood on the barren surface of the moon designated as the neutral meeting ground, the only sound the soft hiss of her environmental suit's air recyclers. Behind her, the Coalition shuttle waited with its engines on standby, ready for immediate evacuation if necessary. This is absolute insanity. Admiral Harrison had argued when she proposed the meeting. You'll be walking straight into a trap. The Xenovori could have destroyed us already, Maya had countered. Their fleet outmatches ours 10-1. They want to talk, not fight. That much was true, but she kept her deeper motivation to herself, the lingering echo of the collective suffering she had felt during her brief connection with the Empress, a pain she might be uniquely positioned to heal. A shadow fell across the lunar surface as the massive Xenovori flagship descended. Unlike the aggressive, spiked configuration of their warships, this vessel featured elegant, flowing lines that reminded Maya of the Architect's structures. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled in her helmet. Remember the emergency extraction signal at the first sign of trouble. I understand. Maya interrupted, switching off the communication link. She needed clarity, not Harrison's paranoid warnings. A section of the Xenovori ship's hull reconfigured itself, forming an entranceway where a ramp extended to the surface. Two figures emerged, tall, iridescent beings with compound eyes and exoskeletons that shimmered with neural filaments, similar to those inside Maya's brain. To the horror of the watching Coalition officers, Maya walked forward alone, meeting the Xenovori representatives halfway. They guided her into the ship, into a chamber unlike anything she had expected. The space was neither aggressive nor alien, but a careful blend of human and Xenovori ergonomics. A neutral environment that accommodated both species' needs. At its center waited the Empress, taller and more luminescent than her escorts, her compound eyes reflecting Maya's image thousands of times over. To Maya's shock, the towering alien lowered herself in a gesture unmistakably resembling a bow. The suffering of countless generations ends with you, the Empress spoke, her voice manifesting directly in Maya's mind rather than through sound waves. The void in our collective consciousness that has driven us to madness may finally be filled. Maya studied the being before her, seeing not a monster, but a victim of the same legacy that had transformed her own life. Your species carries a corrupted version of the Sovereign Protocol. Yes, the Empress confirmed. Implanted in our ancestors by the architects to connect us to their governance network. When the network collapsed, the protocol remained, creating an emptiness that could only be filled by finding and submitting to the true sovereign. She extended a delicate appendage toward Maya. Our scientists have confirmed that your neural pattern matches the original template. By right of the ancient laws, the Xenovori Collective belongs to you. Command us and end our pain. Maya felt the weight of trillions of lives resting on her response. The power being offered was absolute, an empire spanning thousands of worlds handed to her freely. As an engineer, she had always sought to fix broken systems, not control them. She approached the ancient control interfaces embedded in the chamber walls, recognizing them as the same technology she had worked with in the architect facility. But now she saw them not as tools of domination, but as connections waiting to be reconfigured. I have a different proposal, Maya said, placing her hands on the interface. The protocol was never meant to create rulers and subjects. It was designed for harmony between diverse species. Drawing on her engineering background, she initiated a connection with the Empress, their minds linking through the ancient technology. Instead of assuming control of the Xenovori collective consciousness, Maya shared her vision of a transformed protocol, one where both she and the Empress would serve as balanced nodes in a decentralized network. A shared sovereignty, the Empress whispered, her consciousness tentatively embracing the concept. This has never been attempted. That's what humans do, Maya replied with a small smile. We find third options when presented with impossible choices. As their minds synchronized through the architect interface, the chamber illuminated with unexpected connections. Tendrils of energy reaching across the galaxy to other species that carried fragments of the architect legacy without knowing it. 12 distinct consciousnesses flickered into momentary contact before fading back to dormancy. There are others, the Empress observed with wonder, all carrying pieces of the pattern. Then let's build something new, Maya proposed, her human perspective allowing her to envision possibilities beyond the rigid parameters of the original protocol. Not an empire, but a network where each species maintains its uniqueness while sharing in collective harmony. For the first time in millennia, hope rippled through the Xenovori collective consciousness. 10 years later, Maya Chen walked through the gleaming corridors of the Convergence Hub, a massive space station constructed at the junction point between human, Xenovori, and 12 other spacefaring civilizations. Her reflection caught briefly in a polished wall panel showed little resemblance to the reluctant lieutenant who had once repaired battle-damaged ships. Fine neural interface circuitry now traced elegant patterns along her temples, marking her role as network architect. She never claimed a throne, despite the coalition's initial pressure to leverage her position for human advantage. Instead, she had insisted on a title that reflected her true contribution, designing systems that connected rather than controlled. Architect Chen. A melodic voice called from behind her. The Palaxian delegation has arrived with their latest synchronization data. Maya turned to see her human assistant, Kai, approaching with a data tablet. The young engineer had specifically requested assignment to the hub, fascinated by the unprecedented collaboration between species that had been mortal enemies just a decade ago. "Thank you, Kai," she replied, accepting the tablet. "Have them meet me in the Eastern Nexus. The primary node will join us shortly." The primary node, formerly known as the Xenovori Empress, had become Maya's closest collaborator. Their complementary perspectives created stability across regions of space that had known only war for millennia. Where Maya brought human innovation and adaptability, the node contributed the collective processing power of trillions of connected minds. Maya paused at a viewport, watching ships of various designs move harmoniously through docking patterns she had personally designed. Traffic control algorithms balanced efficiency with the unique requirements of each species, from the methane-breathing Dorelli to the crystalline Thalaxians, whose vessels shattered if they changed velocity too quickly. Her engineering background had proved to be exactly what the nascent interspecies network needed, not because it gave her power over technology, but because it taught her that resilient systems required both structure and adaptability. The universe wasn't a machine to be controlled, but a complex ecosystem to be balanced. "You're contemplating again," observed the primary node, her iridescent form gliding silently beside Maya. Over the years, the Xenovori leader had modified her appearance to be less intimidating to humans, though she still towered over Maya by nearly a meter. "Old habits," Maya smiled. "Engineers are always looking for improvements." "The Palaxians are integrating well," the node noted. "That makes 13 species now connected to the modified protocol." Maya nodded. Their quantum-based consciousness presented unique challenges, but the system adapted faster than expected. They walked together toward the meeting, their steps synchronized without conscious effort, one of many small effects of their shared connection through the redesigned protocol. A young human apprentice approached, recently arrived from Earth to study the hub's operations. "Architect Chen, I have a question about your history." Maya gestured for her to continue. The archives say you refused the title of sovereign when the ancient protocols clearly designated you as such, the apprentice said. Why reject that power when you could have ruled multiple civilizations? The primary node emitted a harmonic tone that Maya recognized as amusement. Maya smiled, pointing to the diverse beings working together throughout the hub. Former enemies now collaborating as equals. Humans with their creative problem-solving, Xenovori with their collective processing abilities, Thalaxians with their crystal-based quantum computing, each contributing unique strengths. Humanity's gift to the stars wasn't our ability to rule, she explained, but our stubborn insistence on finding third options when presented with impossible choices. They reached the Eastern Nexus, where representatives from 13 species awaited them. Maya took her position at the circular interface, the primary node beside her. As they initiated the synchronization sequence, Maya reflected that she had never needed to become more than what she always was, an engineer who saw broken systems not as fixed realities, but as problems waiting for better solutions. The coalition military had wanted weapons. That Xenovori had wanted a queen. The ancient architects had designed a hierarchy, but Maya Chen had reimagined their legacy as a network where each node maintained its uniqueness while contributing to collective harmony. It wasn't the future anyone had envisioned, but it was one that an engineer could build, connection by connection, innovation by innovation, inspired by the uniquely human ability to look at an established pattern and ask, what if we tried something new?